Have you ever asked yourself, why do certain thoughts keep showing up in your mind, thoughts you don't even want? Why do they return again and again, like waves that never really stop? You might say to yourself, I don't want to think about this anymore. But your mind keeps circling back to it anyway. And maybe you've blamed yourself for the desires you can't seem to control. You feel ashamed. You feel weak. You even start to question, can I really become a better person? But what if I told you this? The Buddha never said desire was inherently bad. Instead, he pointed to something even more profound. That how we face our desires, that's what determines whether we stay trapped or find freedom. Today, I want to share with you an ancient story. A conversation between a young man and the Buddha. One that might help you see your own struggles with desire in a completely different light. A long time ago, a young man came to see the Buddha, his face heavy with worry. He sat down, bowed low, and said, "Blessed One, I'm exhausted. My mind is constantly pulled by unwholesome thoughts. I don't want to think about desire, but it keeps coming back. Every time I see a beautiful woman pass by, my heart stirs. I don't want this, but I can't control it. How can I ever find peace?" The Buddha didn't scold him. He didn't frown. He simply smiled gently and asked, "Do you know what desire is?" The young man shook his head. "Not really," he said. "But I know it makes me feel uneasy. I think it's something bad." The Buddha said slowly, "The first thing you must understand is this. No emotion within you is evil in itself. Desire is just a feeling. It shows that something inside you is missing. If you lack love, you'll crave it. If you lack money, you'll hunger for it. If you feel disconnected, you may be pulled toward physical intimacy. This is desire, not an enemy, but a signal." He paused before adding, "Desire doesn't come from the outside. It already lives in all of us. And it's necessary without it. How could humanity even survive? The question is, what do you do with it?" The young man frowned, still unsure. So, the Buddha shared a story. In a monastery by a river, a teacher lived with his disciples. Their days were simple. They practiced, studied, and lived in harmony. Each morning, some disciples would walk into a nearby village to receive alms. One of them had to pass by the riverbank, where village girls would often come to fetch water. One morning, that disciple noticed a young man hiding behind a tree, eyes fixed on the girls. He asked, "Hey, what are you doing here?" The young man smiled and pointed. "Look at them, the way they move. Their hair dancing in the wind. They're beautiful." The disciple looked briefly and replied, "They're just fetching water. What's so special?" But curiosity crept in. He began to pay more attention. And slowly, something shifted inside him. Day by day, he lingered longer by the river. He watched more intently. And before long, his thoughts of spiritual practice faded, replaced by images that returned again and again, uninvited. His teacher noticed the change. One day, he quietly followed and found the disciple crouched behind the same tree. The teacher asked, "What are you doing here?" The disciple bowed his head, ashamed. "Master, I'm sorry. That young man influenced me. I was wrong." The teacher nodded. "It's okay. But remember this. We become like those we spend time with. If you surround yourself with minds full of distraction, your mind will mirror theirs. So choose your companions wisely." Thinking he understood, the disciple returned to the monastery. But his mind was no longer still. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. His heart was in turmoil. That night, the teacher led him to the monastery's back garden, where a small stream flowed from the river. He asked, "Can you block this stream?" The disciple piled up mud and stones. The water stopped for a moment. Then it trickled through. The teacher said, "That's your mind. Even if you block it halfway, the current finds a way. To stop it, you must go to the source." He took him upstream, to where the water first began to flow. "Here," he said, "if you block it here, the garden will remain dry." The disciple listened carefully, feeling a new insight blooming in his heart. But the teacher wasn't finished. "Remember," he said, "the garden needs water to live. Your mind needs emotion too. The goal isn't to shut it down, but to regulate it. Too little, and the heart becomes dry. Too much, and it floods. Learn balance." Then he asked, "If I told you not to think of a mango, what just popped into your head?" The disciple laughed. "A mango." The teacher smiled. "That's the mind. The more you resist a thought, the stronger it becomes. So don't punish yourself. Learn to observe, acknowledge, and gently transform." And from that day on, the disciple stopped running away from his desires. He began to observe them with mindfulness, surrounded himself with wholesome influences, and, most importantly, he no longer blamed himself when unwanted thoughts arose. He didn't reject those who once led him astray. He welcomed them with compassion and a steadier heart. So, dear friend, this story isn't just about a young monk in the past. It's about all of us, living in a world full of distractions and temptations. A world where desire isn't wrong, but where freedom begins when we understand it. So now the question is, how do we hold desire without being held captive by it? How do we remain steady, even when the mind wants to wander? Let's go deeper in the next part of this journey, where we explore how to stay grounded, centered, and at peace, even in the face of life's strongest temptations. 1. Desire is not evil, a story about a misunderstood longing. One time, after a Dharma sharing at a small meditation center in California, a woman in her 40s came up to me and asked softly, "Teacher, why do I feel ashamed for having desires? I know they're not good, but I can't deny they're still inside me." She wasn't the first person to ask that question, and I'm sure she won't be the last. Because human beings by nature are emotional beings. When we're hungry, we seek food. When we're cold, we crave warmth. And when we lack connection, love, or even just simple closeness, desire arises. Not as some sort of sin, but as a voice calling from a place of absence deep inside. The Buddha once said, "There is nothing inherently evil in the mind. Every emotion is a message. Desire is a message too. The problem begins when we cling to it and make it the center of our life. And that is where so many of us get lost." When people hear the word desire, they usually think of lust, temptation, or something morally wrong. But rarely do we pause to look deeper to see that desire often arises from a deeper lack. Lack of love, lack of connection, lack of self-worth, lack of belonging. I remember a middle-aged man once shared after a meditation retreat, "I feel so guilty. These images keep rising in my mind. Things I don't want to think about. I try chanting. I try meditating. But the more I resist, the stronger they come." And he's not alone. Because the more we reject a feeling, the tighter it holds on to us, like it's begging to be heard. It's like telling a child, "Don't do that." What happens? They get more curious. Our mind is the same. When we say, "Don't think about desire," it pushes back harder like it's being rejected. So, does that mean desire is bad? Number. Desire is not the problem. What causes suffering is our attachment to desire. When we no longer even know what we're truly longing for, but we're swept away by the shadow of that craving. One day, a young lay Buddhist asked me in an online session, "How can I tell if my desire is healthy or if it's controlling me?" I smiled and told him the story of a young monk who once came to the Buddha, burdened with guilt over his thoughts about women. He felt ashamed, afraid, and he begged the Buddha to help him purify his mind. But the Buddha didn't scold him. He didn't say, "You're weak." He didn't shame or condemn. He simply said, "Desire doesn't come from outside. It's already within each of us, a natural part of being human. It's what drives life forward. But if you make it your life's purpose, you'll lose yourself." That teaching reminded me of an older man over 60, once a successful businessman. Toward the end of his life, he joined a meditation retreat and shared something that silenced the whole room. He said quietly, "I spent my whole life chasing every desire, money, romance, power. And now, I don't even know who I am without them." We all sat there, stunned, because deep down, we knew. We've all lived like that at some point. Maybe not to the same extreme, but we've all let one longing become the center of our lives. And in doing so, lost touch with who we truly are. Desire, when it becomes your goal in life, throws your heart into chaos. It's like being thirsty and drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. The Buddha didn't teach us to crush desire with force. He taught us to observe it, understand it, and then let it go. There's a story where the Buddha asked a disciple, "If I told you not to think of a mango, what shows up in your mind?" The disciple laughed, "A mango, of course." The Buddha nodded and said, "The more you try to suppress something, the more it takes root. The mind doesn't need suppression, it needs mindfulness. And mindfulness begins when you dare to look directly at what's inside, not avoiding it, not judging it, like a father looking at a mischievous child. Not to punish, but to understand why the child is screaming. Desire is the same. When seen with eyes of compassion and awareness, it begins to soften on its own. I remember a wise old Zen teacher from Oregon once told me, "Desire, at its core, is just the soul missing its true nature." When we forget who we are, we start chasing aliveness from the outside, through touch, through emotions, through achievement. But nothing outside can truly fill the emptiness within. And it's true. Some people jump from relationship to relationship, from one high to the next. But in the end, they still feel lonely. Because no one and nothing can fill a hollow heart. Desire is the symptom. Emptiness is the root. But when you turn inward, nourish your inner being, and return to the peace that doesn't depend on anything, desire no longer drags you around. It's still there, like a natural part of the human condition, but it no longer controls you. So, if you're wrestling with desire, please don't jump to the conclusion that you're a bad person. If you feel ashamed for thoughts you didn't invite it, and force yourself to shut them down. Instead, slow down. Look beneath the surface of that desire. Maybe what you'll find is an old wound that hasn't healed, a voice longing to be heard, or just a very human part of you that needs to be held with mindfulness and with kindness. 2. Your environment and companions, mirrors of your mind. There's something quite mysterious that most people come to realize as they live long enough. We don't live alone, and the mind, which we often assume is entirely our own, is actually very sensitive to the people around us. Think about it for a second. Have you ever felt lighter, more at ease, just by sitting next to someone who radiates peace? Or the opposite, just stepped into a room where someone was anxious, and suddenly your chest tightens, your breath shortens, and your heart races, even though no one said a word? Emotions are contagious. Attitudes spread. And if we spend enough time around someone, we start to think like them, feel like them, even act like them often, without even realizing it. In Buddhist teachings, this is expressed very clearly. A spiritual friend is not just part of the path. They are the path. In other words, the people we surround ourselves with each day are not just companions on the road, they're mirrors reflecting the landscape of our inner world. There's a story the Buddha once shared about a young monk. He was once clear-minded and devoted, but after spending time with someone whose mind was unwholesome and scattered, he gradually lost his way. It wasn't because the other person pressured him. It was simply being around that energy for too long. No one forced him. No one gave commands. Just the tone of voice, the way that person saw life, their presence quietly began to influence him, like a drop of ink falling into a glass of clear water, not loud, not dramatic, but over time, the water turns murky. The teacher at the monastery noticed something had changed. He didn't scold the disciple. He didn't criticize. Instead, he gently asked, "How many times have you walked down that path?" "I'm not sure, Master. Many times, I guess." "And before, did those images ever disturb you?" "No, I didn't really notice them." The teacher smiled and said calmly, "Your mind is like soft soil. If someone sows good seed, soft kindness, mindfulness, compassion, beautiful flowers will grow. But if the seeds are craving, anger, or delusion, that's what will bloom too. Then he looked the disciple in the eye and said, "You're not a bad person. You're just being influenced. What you need is not to blame yourself, but to choose your environment wisely. Choose carefully who you allow to plant seeds in the soil of your mind. Now pause and reflect." In modern life, how many people are struggling with themselves not because of something inherently wrong with them, but simply because they've been living too long in toxic environments? A woman who worked in media once told me, "I don't recognize myself anymore. Every day I find myself comparing, chasing appearances, faking perfection. I feel like I have to put on makeup for my emotions, like if I'm not flawless, I don't deserve to exist." She wasn't born like that. The environment shaped her. Every single day, we're being fed by some kind of energy. From the people we talk to, the content we consume, the social media we scroll, even the jokes we hear that seem harmless. And if we're not mindful, we slowly become a reflection of that environment without even knowing it. The Buddha didn't teach us to avoid every negative person because that's impossible. But he did teach us to discern who should we stay close to and who should we hold at a healthy distance in the mind. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "You become the person you associate with." And if we lack wise companions and a wholesome environment, even the most sincere practice, whether as monks or laypeople, can veer off track. Take a look at your life. Who do you see every day? Do they bring light, peace, and purpose into your world? Or do they pull you away from yourself and the values you hold dear? And just as important, are you planting wholesome seeds in someone else's heart? Or perhaps unintentionally, are your words, your gaze, your actions spreading doubt or anxiety to others? These are not easy questions, but they're worth asking. In meditation, there's a practice called mindful reflection on your environment. Each day, take a few minutes to look back. What did I expose my mind to today? Who did I draw close to? How has my inner world been affected? Because the mind is like freshly tilled earth, soft, absorbent, open, and any seed, good or bad, can take root. 3. Don't suppress desire. Understand it and transform it. There's a quiet truth most people only discover after years of struggling with themselves. The more you try to forget something, the more it stays. The harder you try to push away a thought, the stronger it pushes back. It's like when someone tells you, "Don't think about a lemon." What's the first thing that pops into your mind? A lemon, bright yellow, sour, with that little facial wince we all make. You see, the mind doesn't operate by force. It doesn't obey commands. It doesn't respond to slogans. It only listens when it feels understood. And it only transforms when it's illuminated with mindfulness, not whipped by guilt or self-judgment. I remember a man who came into a retreat in Seattle one evening, completely exhausted. He said, "I've tried so hard not to think about worldly things. I work until I forget to eat. I meditate, I chant, I avoid social media. But the more I try to escape those thoughts, the more they pull me in. And at some point, I realized I wasn't tired because of desire. I was tired because I was fighting myself every single day." The whole room fell silent. Because deep down, most of us have been there. That feeling of not being allowed to have certain emotions, of trying to suppress them, judge them, and ultimately becoming estranged from our own hearts. The Buddha understood this so deeply. Once, he took a young monk to the stream behind the monastery and asked, "Can you stop this water from flowing?" The disciple tried piling mud and stones to block it. The water paused for a bit, but soon it leaked through, and then came rushing even stronger. The Buddha smiled and said, "That's how your mind works. When you try to block a stream of thought with force, it doesn't disappear. It just gets suppressed, and eventually, it breaks through another way, even louder and more intense." That story still holds so much wisdom, especially in today's world. We're surrounded by information, temptations, images, pressure, and this constant demand to keep your mind pure. But here's the thing. The mind isn't a sterile room that needs to be swept clean every day. It's a living garden. It has weeds and wildflowers, deep roots and soft petals. It has bees and butterflies, and yes, sometimes even bugs. And your job isn't to rip out every weed. Your job is to become a better gardener, to notice the weeds, but not let them take over, to cultivate the sunlight, so even the shadows lose their grip. In Buddhist teachings, there's no place for emotional suppression. The Buddha didn't teach us to kill desire by strangling it. He taught us to understand it, to get to the root of it, and from there, to transform. As we said earlier, desire is just a signal, a sign of something missing. And like any emotion, it simply wants to be heard, not indulged but understood. And when you truly listen, you gain something powerful, the ability to choose. You don't have to react instantly. You don't have to run toward it. You don't have to deny it. You just know it's there, and then you choose the wiser path. I remember a middle-aged woman at a retreat in Texas who said, "I used to see desire as something dirty, something I had to eliminate. But now that I treat it like any other feeling, not better, not worse, I'm not afraid of it anymore. And when I'm not afraid of it, it doesn't control me." That's a powerful shift from suppression to awareness. There's a beautiful image from meditation practice that many people use. Imagine you're sitting by the side of a road. Your thoughts, including desires there, just cars passing by. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to stand in the road and block them. You just sit still. Watch the car pass. Notice its color, its speed, its shape, and let it go. That's all. And strangely enough, when no one's chasing the car, it has no reason to circle back. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "Like a river, when blocked, the water finds a new path. Only when you understand the source can you redirect the stream. So instead of trying to block the water midstream, go upstream. Ask yourself, where did this thought begin? What feeling sparked it? What wound hasn't healed yet? What part of your life is still waiting to be seen?" And once the light of understanding touches it, desire no longer needs to scream for attention. It's been seen. It's been heard. And because of that, it begins to quiet. A lot of people think that to practice is to get rid of all desire, to shut down every emotion. But that's a huge misunderstanding. Practice is not about rejection, it's about transformation. Not about escape, but about facing what is with compassion and wisdom. That's why true spiritual practitioners aren't cold or disconnected. They're warm. They don't reject emotions. They just don't let emotions run the show. They understand, and in that understanding, they are free. 4. If you want to end desire, go back to the source. There's something you begin to understand more deeply the longer you live, and especially the longer you meditate. No river flows without a source, and no thought shows up in your mind without a cause. Every desire, every thought, every wave of emotion, no matter how sudden it feels, has a root. It may not be obvious. It may seem to come out of nowhere. But if we're willing to pause and look a little deeper, we'll see everything leaves traces. Everything begins somewhere. It's like trying to stop a river downstream. You build a dam, pile up barriers, but the water leaks through. It spills over. It finds another path to flow. Only when you walk upstream, to the very place where the first drops seep through the cracks in the rocks, can you truly redirect the course of the river. And the mind is just like that. There's a story the Buddha once shared with a young disciple. The disciple was struggling, saying no matter how hard he tried to control his desires, they just kept coming back. The Buddha didn't answer right away. He simply walked, motioning for the disciple to follow. They came to a small stream behind the monastery. The Buddha asked, "Can you stop this water from flowing?" The disciple started piling up mud and dirt to create a little dam. The water paused for a moment. Then it spilled over the edge, finding a new route. The Buddha said, "See, you can block the water here, but it doesn't stop it. It just changes direction." And that's how the mind works too. If you only try to stop a negative thought by force, it'll sneak back in another form. Until you find the source, you'll never truly change the flow. Then he led the disciple upstream, past trees, around bends, until they reached a small rocky crevice where the water first emerged from deep within the earth. He pointed and said, "If you stop it here, the garden below stays dry." Likewise, if you understand the root of your thoughts, you can truly let them go. In daily life, many people get exhausted trying to push certain emotions away. They try to shove them out of their minds, but the harder they try, the louder they return. Some feel trapped in desire, some haunted by jealousy, some stuck in the cycle of comparing themselves to others. And most of the time, they're just dealing with the surface, not the root. They rarely pause to ask, where's this coming from? When did it begin? What was the trigger? At a Dharma talk in Los Angeles, a man in his 50s shared, "I know my desires have caused me to lose many things, but I can't stop. Every time I'm lonely or down, it shows up again. It feels stronger than logic. I know it hurts me, but I still do it." That man didn't need a lecture. He didn't need someone to say, "You should control yourself better." What he needed was someone to look beneath the surface with him. And underneath his desire was a deep emptiness, a sense of disconnection. As a child, he grew up in a home where silence was the main language. No hugs, no words of affection. No one truly listened. So he learned to fill that emptiness with work, with possessions, and when he felt vulnerable, with desire. The Buddha calls this a lacking mind. When your inner bowl is empty, no matter how much you pour into it from the outside, it never feels full. And so we keep searching, keep repeating, until it becomes a paterna stream of consciousness. Only when we go back, all the way to the source, can we begin to change the current. So the next time an unwanted thought shows up, don't push it away. Instead, ask, what am I missing right now that this desire is trying to cover up? Am I tired, lonely, hurt, feeling unseen? And when that question is asked with mindfulness and compassion, a new path opens. A meditation student once wrote in her retreat journal, "For the first time, I stopped blaming myself for the thoughts that arose. Instead, I sat down with them. And what I saw wasn't something bad. It was a child in my heart I had forgotten, crying, just wanting to be held. The mind is like a child. Scold it, and it resists. Ignore it, and it screams louder. But if you sit beside it, hold it, and gently ask, what's hurting you? That child begins to soften. And from that moment, healing begins." In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "The wise do not only extinguish the flame, they seek the glowing ember that fuels it. Because a fire only burns when there's something feeding it. And negative thoughts only stick around when they find something to cling to. As long as we feed the conditions that allow these thoughts to thrive, they'll keep coming back. But once the root is seen, truly seen, what once felt like a powerful temptation becomes no more than a breeze passing by." 5. The light of awakening. One person stands steady, another finds their way. There's an old saying in Buddhism that goes, "One lit lamp can light 100 others without ever losing its flame." And perhaps there's no clearer image of this truth than the story of the young disciple in the Buddha's teachings. We followed his journey from the moment he got caught in desire, from a passing glance by the riverbank, to the struggles that followed, to the guidance of his teacher, the deep reflection, and finally, the return to his true self. But what's most powerful isn't just that he found his way back. It's what happened after. One morning, the disciple walked once again along that same old path by the river bend, where the village girls came to fetch water. But this time, he didn't avoid it. He didn't lower his gaze out of fear. He didn't stare in longing either. He wasn't distracted by flowing hair or graceful movements. He simply walked with ease, with calm, with full presence. When one of the girls smiled and offered him water, he placed his palms together, bowed gently, and offered a blessing in return. Gone was the young man who once trembled in temptation. In his place stood someone whose eyes were clear, whose heart was steady walking, as if there was nothing in the world left to chase or run from. And as fate would have it, the same young man who once tempted him, the one who hid behind the trees to spy on the girls, was also there that morning. Out of habit, perhaps, he stood behind the familiar tree, watching. But something felt different. He saw the disciple walk right past the women, not avoiding them, not indulging, not pretending, just being there. Still, bright, peaceful, and for some reason, the old friend felt shaken. When the disciple walked away, the man ran after him. "Hey, today you got even closer to them than I did. But you didn't look at them the same way. How did you do that?" The disciple turned, smiled softly. No judgment, no lecture, no moral sermon, just one sentence. We spend so much time looking outward, and almost never stop to look within. That one simple line spoken without force landed in a place deep inside the other man. Because even those caught in confusion have moments of clarity. Sometimes all they need is someone to light a lamp. And sometimes just that tiny flame is enough to make someone lost in darkness pause and turn around. From that day on, the young man no longer hid behind the tree, not because someone told him not to, but because something in him shifted. He began to change slowly. He did small chores around the village, helped the elders, listened to stories, tried sitting quietly for a few minutes each morning, started observing his thoughts without judgment. No one told him to do any of that. He simply saw someone who once struggled the way he did, now walking in peace. And he wanted that too. The Buddha once said, "The mind may be like a dark cloud, but one drop of light can begin to change the whole sky." One person standing steady can help others find their own center of gravity. Not through control, not through loud teaching, but through the way they live. There are people we once labeled as bad, but maybe they were just never guided right. And there are people who've made serious mistakes, but after waking up, they become the very ones who show others the path. In Buddhism, this is the power of inner reflection. When someone returns to their own heart, they don't just save themselves. They become a mirror, and their light, even if silent, naturally spreads. In New York, there's a woman who struggled with addiction for many years. After getting help, she made a quiet decision to rebuild her life. She didn't preach. She didn't speak on stages. She simply opened a small cafe, a place where people could sit even if they didn't buy anything, a place to read, to write, or just to be. Young people lost and restless started coming. Then they returned, not for the coffee, but for her presence. A woman who had once hit rock bottom, now sat in calm, her eyes full of compassion. Someone who had once fallen, now helped others rise. Because she understood, and because she didn't judge. Coming back to the young disciple's story, we see this clearly. The deepest transformation doesn't come from debate. It comes from presence. One peaceful person entering a space, can calm even the wildest waves. Someone who's overcome temptation doesn't need to tell others what to do. Their presence alone makes others want to overcome it too. That's the power of quiet action, of compassion, of true understanding. 6. Desire the shadow of emptiness. There are moments when, even though everything on the outside seems fine, we still feel something's missing. You have a job. You have a family. You're in a relationship that seems okay. And yet there's this quiet space inside. A silence that no music, no text, no social gathering can truly fill. And if we don't recognize that space, if we don't look into it deeply, it slowly becomes the ground where temptations sneak in. During a spring retreat in San Francisco, someone said it perfectly in just one sentence. I don't lack anything, and yet I keep searching. And many in the room nodded. Not because they shared the same life circumstances, but because they knew that feeling, that inner hunger, even when everything outside seems full. The Buddha called it spiritual emptiness, a disconnection from ourselves, from others, and from a deeper sense of meaning. And when that emptiness goes unacknowledged, desire often in disguise shows up, not as a solution, but as a temporary filler. Something that feels alive, but isn't really real. It's just a shadow. There was a man in his 50s who once shared his story like this. I used to think I was rational, not easily tempted. But when the kids grew up, my wife and I barely talked. Friends got busy. I started noticing my mind wandering. Thoughts I used to laugh off suddenly became regular visitors. I knew I wasn't lacking anything material, but I was missing something, and I couldn't name it. And in that unnamed space, desire crept in. No loud knock, no warning. Just slipped in quietly, riding along loneliness, boredom, and blank stares in the morning mirror. Another retreatant, a woman once said, every time I feel not good enough, not beautiful enough, not loved enough, the images I used to avoid come back. And I know they don't help, but I still seek them out just to escape, even if just for a few minutes. It's not desire that causes the suffering. It's the emptiness that gives desire a place to grow. In the Buddhist teachings, this isn't new. He once said, unwholesome desires arise from a mind not nourished by mindfulness, compassion, and right understanding. When the mind isn't fed with wholesome things, it gets hungry, and a hungry mind will reach for anything within reach. Like someone starving who doesn't care whether the food is nourishing or not. They just need to feel full. That's why understanding the root of desire is so important. Instead of fighting it, ask yourself, am I lacking connection? Am I feeling unseen or unheard? Is my life missing meaning right now? Do I feel unloved even by myself? During a winter meditation session in Oregon, someone teared up when asked, when was the last time you felt truly understood? After a long pause, he said, when I was 10, my mom sat by my bed, held my hand, and didn't say anything. She just stayed with me. Since then, he'd lived over 40 years full of success and status, but never felt that again. It wasn't desire that confused him. It was the child inside him who had never been healed. Desire isn't bad by nature. It's just a signal, a way the heart says, something is missing. I need to feel seen. I need compassion, understanding, and something that truly matters. A Zen teacher once said, the more you seek aliveness from the outside, the more you lose the real life within. Because desire at the end of the day is just a shadow. It doesn't solve anything. It only temporarily covers the emptiness. And when it fades, that emptiness feels even bigger. So the real solution isn't to run from desire. It's to nourish your inner life with awareness. To care for yourself like a mother cares for her child. To sit down each day even just for 5 minutes and ask, am I really living today? Is my heart hungry? Does it need to be heard? To be loved? To reconnect with something deeper? Because only when our heart is full of what's real can the false things finally fade. 7. When unwholesome thoughts arise, don't blame yourself. Understand yourself. One of the most common reactions people have when they begin to practice the Dharma or even just try to live a better, kinder life is guilt. Guilt for still having impure or negative thoughts. Guilt for feeling angry, jealous, envious, or desiring something you think you shouldn't. Guilt for repeating a mistake you promised yourself you'd never make again. But here's the paradox. The more you blame yourself, the more stuck you get in that very cycle. The Buddha made this very clear. When an unwholesome state arises, don't blame yourself. Be aware and return to balance. Nowhere did he say, you must punish yourself before you can be forgiven. He didn't say, scold yourself into becoming better. Just 2 things. Awareness and balance. Because the first step of transformation is not changing. It's understanding. Understanding yourself. Understanding where in you the light is missing. Understanding where the emotion came from. And once you understand, the path forward naturally becomes clearer. A woman in her 40s once shared during a retreat in Oregon, whenever I get angry, I end up hating myself more than the person who hurt me. She said it through tears, and it touched many people in the room. Because, truthfully, many of us don't suffer from what others did to us. We suffer from how we turn on ourselves afterward. When anger rises, instead of observing and understanding, we often do one of 2 things. We either lash out like fire or swallow it like acid. Both cause harm. But what if, in that moment, we could simply recognize, anger is here. We don't merge with it. We don't push it away. We just notice it and breathe. That tiny pause creates space. And suddenly, we're no longer the anger. We're the ones seeing the anger. You see, the mind isn't like an air conditioner that always stays at 72 degrees. It fluctuates. Sometimes it's cool and gentle. Sometimes it's hot and wild. Sometimes it's numb and cold. That's normal. What's not normal is when we judge ourselves for every passing emotional wave. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha compared the mind to a lake. When the wind blows, the surface ripples, but the water is still water. It doesn't turn into sand or fire. It just reflects whatever is passing through. Our mind is the same. It's not bad just because a bad thought arises. It's just reflecting what we've seen, heard, or experienced from the past, from our surroundings, from old habits. There was a young man who once shared, I used to struggle with dark thoughts. I felt like I was damaged. Every time it happened, I'd try to fight it off, but the more I fought, the stronger it came back. Until one day, I just stopped and asked, why are you here? And that changed everything. That one question, simple as it sounds, was a huge turning point. He stopped fearing himself and started wanting to understand himself. Desire, anger, envy, they're not demons to destroy. They're visitors. Each one comes with a message. Desire might be saying, I feel disconnected. Anger might be saying, I'm hurt, and no one's acknowledged it. Jealousy might be saying, I don't feel worthy. If all we do is yell at these visitors, slam the door, and push them away, we'll never understand why they came. But if we sit with them, listen without judgment, eventually they'll leave on their own because they've been heard. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught, see anger as anger. See craving as craving. See restlessness as restlessness. No need to identify. No need to run. Just see with mindfulness. See without labeling yourself bad. See with compassion. Because that gentle seeing, that's where true transformation begins. There's something many seasoned practitioners eventually realize. The deepest changes don't come from force or pressure. They come when we stop fighting ourselves. When we stop calling ourselves bad. When we stop demanding perfection. When we stop scolding the mind every time it moves. That's when stillness begins to return. So next time a thought comes up that makes you shrink or recoil, don't panic. Don't label yourself as unworthy. Just place a hand on your heart, take a deep breath, and say, I see you. It's okay. We'll walk through this together. And if you do this often enough, you'll come to realize you're not weak. You're just learning how to live with loving kindness toward yourself. 8. Choose what's meaningful, and desire will have nowhere to hide. There are seasons in life when nothing's really wrong, but something just feels off. No major crisis. No clear pain or trauma. Just this strange feeling each morning, like something's missing. A quiet emptiness. A tightness in the chest. A restless hum that won't go away. And in that emptiness, it's so easy to reach for something, anything. Just feel something. A quick click. A fleeting sensation. A familiar habit that numbs us, even just for a moment. But after those moments pass, the emptiness returns deeper than before. And the deeper question starts to rise. Am I really living, or just filling time with pleasures that come and go? The Buddha once said, the awakened one does not seek joy in fleeting pleasure, but in what holds lasting meaning. That may sound like a moral rule, but really, it's a key to inner freedom. Because when we live only for sensation, our mind is constantly chasing what's outside. But when we live with purpose, the mind starts to glow from within. There was a man who once shared his story. He wasn't addicted to anything extreme, but he would stay up all night watching videos, spend money on things he didn't need, text just to kill time. When someone asked him, what made you start to change? He didn't mention hitting rock bottom. He just said, I realized I'd never done anything meaningful with my life. Not because he was bad, but because he'd never asked himself, why am I really living today? Does what I'm doing make me a better person? Does it ease someone else's burden? Does it leave the world even a little more beautiful? That kind of question, it's simple, but powerful. It's like turning on a light. And once the light is there, the shadows have nowhere left to hide. Desire, when it has nothing to cling to, naturally fades. Like a fire with nothing left to burn, it dies down on its own. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, the wise delight in wholesome acts, like climbing a mountain, seeing far and wide. But the one who clings to fleeting pleasures is like sinking deeper into mud with every step. Desire isn't wrong. It just doesn't lead anywhere. It doesn't deepen us. It doesn't help us grow. It keeps us spinning in circles, trapped in short-term highs. But meaningful Act 7, the small once open, a longer, clearer path, a heart that feels truly thanked, a small act of kindness, a shift in an old habit, a pause to really listen to yourself. These may seem tiny, but they're the places where desire can't cling. In a meditation retreat in Seattle, a man in his 60s shared this. I started growing vegetables in my backyard. At first, I just wanted something to do. But then, I watched the seeds sprout. I felt the soil on my hands. I woke up with something to look forward to. And slowly, the desires I used to fight, they just faded. Not because I pushed them away, but because I finally had something else to love more. So simple, yet so profound. The Buddha never told us to punish ourselves. He simply pointed out, when the heart is filled with what's meaningful, the meaningless no longer finds space to live. No one can live a life of love, creativity, and deep connection and still be trapped in the same old cravings. They just don't coexist. So instead of fighting off desire, invite in what matters. And maybe, each morning, we can begin by asking one real down-to-earth question. What small, beautiful thing can I do today? For someone else? For myself? For this world? It could be a phone call, a thank you note, an hour of reading without checking your phone, a step outside instead of staying in all day, an act of kindness that lifts someone's burden even just a little. Each of these things, like a small brick, begins to rebuild the foundation of your mind. Because in the end, we don't awaken by destroying every desire. We awaken by growing the right desires. A desire to be kind. A desire to understand. A desire to leave behind something beautiful as we walk through this life. And as those wholesome longings grow, the old cravings will quietly retreat, just like shadows fade when the sun begins to rise. When you live with meaning, your mind no longer runs after fleeting highs, because now it has something far more beautiful to be busy with. 9. The more you stare, the easier it is to stray. The hidden danger of feeding the unconscious. There are things in life that if you only glance at them seem harmless. Just a passing look. Just a quick image. Just a fleeting thought. But here's the truth. If we're not mindful, even those tiny passing moments can quietly turn into an undercurrent that pulls our mind away before we even realize it. There's a story from the Buddha's teachings that illustrates this perfectly. A young monk once noticed another man standing behind a tree, watching a group of women gathering water. At first, the monk was simply curious. He asked, "What's so interesting that you're looking for so long?" But then, he started looking too. Just once. Then again. Then every time. What started as a passing glance turned into focused watching. What began as an outer image grew into an inner fantasy. And before long, something that once felt meaningless had taken root in his mind. The Buddha compared the mind to a field. Whatever seed you plant, that's the tree that will grow. It doesn't have to be a big seed. Just a small one, if watered often, can grow into a tree that casts a huge shadow across the whole mind. Our thoughts work the same way. One thought if stared at too long, remembered too deeply, imagined too vividly can turn into a trap. Here's the dangerous part. The more often we repeat a feeling, the more we feed it, the stronger it gets. Not because it was strong to begin with, but because we fed it. At a community gathering in New Jersey, a young man once shared, "I didn't think I was overly lustful, but I found myself scrolling social media for hours, constantly stopping at suggestive images. I didn't go looking for them. They found me, but I didn't scroll past. And after a few months, I realized I was addicted." He wasn't wrong. In today's world, temptation doesn't need an invitation. It shows up automatically. And if we're not mindful enough to pause early, it starts to take root. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "Whatever is frequently thought and remembered becomes the tendency of the mind." Tendency, meaning the unconscious direction your mind begins to drift toward again and again. The young monk didn't fall into desire because he looked once. He fell because he kept looking without realizing it. It's like someone who has one glass of wine. At first, it's just social. Then it feels nice. Then another glass. Then another. And before long, what started as a passing taste becomes the only escape when life feels heavy. Desire is like that. It doesn't need a grand opening, just a small doorway of habit. There's a practical image that many meditation teachers use when guiding lay people. If you know you're easily tempted by visual things, don't stare too long. If you know your mind tends to wander, don't let it run too far. Cut it early like a farmer pulling weeds while they're still young. Because if you wait too long, you'll need to cut the root, and that hurts. This doesn't mean we should live in fear or shame or suppress every feeling. It simply means live with awareness. Know that you have the right to choose what you water in your mind every day. It's like shopping at the grocery store. You can walk past the candy aisle, see the sweets, the chocolates, the treats. You might even crave them for a moment. But if you know that eating them leads to feeling sluggish, gaining weight, or harming your health, then you can choose not to put them in your cart. Not because you hate them, not because someone told you don't, but because you understand. And you know what nourishes you more deeply. An older Buddhist once said at a retreat, "I used to try to force all lustful images out of my mind, but eventually I realized the more I tried to push them out, the more they clung to me. Only when I stopped feeding them, they naturally left." That's exactly what the Buddha taught. We don't need to fight desire. We just need to stop feeding it with our eyes, our imagination, our unconscious repetition. When you stop watering, a seed it dries out. When you stop staring at the flame, it dies down. When you stop holding on to the image, it fades. So the lesson here isn't, don't have desire. It's, know what you're feeding. Be mindful of what your eyes linger on. Be aware of where your attention keeps flowing, because that's where your mind will grow. 10. Mindfulness. The light that shines through temptation. There's a simple but profound truth in Buddhism. Temptation can't control you if you're truly present. You don't need to be enlightened. You don't need to run off into the mountains. You just need to know, in that moment, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you're about to do. That's mindfulness. As simple as that, and as powerful as that. In one of the Buddhist stories, a disciple who had been pulled into desire struggled deeply with it. But what helped him stop wasn't some magical force from the outside. It was awareness. He went back to the river, the place that once stirred his heart, and this time, he didn't look unconsciously. He knew where his eyes landed. He recognized the feelings rising inside him. And because he knew he could stop, not out of fear, not from guilt, but from understanding. One student of Buddhism once shared that she started meditating not because she wanted to become a monk or master the teachings, but simply because her mind felt torn apart by all the noise and temptations of modern life. She said, "At first, I didn't know what meditation even was. I just sat down, placed my hand over my chest, and asked myself, what am I feeling right now? And I realized, for years, I'd been living without ever asking myself that question." That story might sound small, but it's actually the essence of mindfulness. Just knowing what you're feeling, just being aware of what's going on inside. No judgment, no running away, just knowing. And once that awareness is present, temptation can't grab hold of you the same way. The Buddha called it sati-mindfulness, a lamp in the dark. You don't have to fight the darkness. Just turn on the light. Temptation thrives in the unconscious. But when that dark corner of the mind is lit up with presence, it loses its power. There's a beautiful image often used by meditation teachers. The human mind is like a young elephant. If it's not tied to a post, it runs wild, trampling everything. But when tethered with a rope of mindfulness, it learns to stay still, and then, eventually, to walk with wisdom. Mindfulness doesn't restrict you. It frees you. A man at a retreat in New York once shared how he used to turn to explicit images whenever he felt exhausted or stressed. Until one day, he learned to sit with that exhaustion. No escaping, no numbing, just breathing, observing his body, his emotions. And surprisingly, after 15 minutes, that craving started to dissolve. Not because he became stronger, but because for once he was fully present with what he was feeling, instead of being swept away by it. That's what mindfulness is. Not suppressing emotions, not forcing yourself to be perfect, but simply sitting down like a kind friend and listening to yourself. Temptation can only pull you when you're absent from your own experience. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha teaches, when breathing in, know you are breathing in. When breathing out, know you are breathing out. When the body is tense, know it is tense. When the mind is unsettled, know it is unsettled. That's it. Nothing fancy. But that simple knowing is the doorway to freedom. Because when you know, you can choose. When you don't know, you're just sleepwalking through life. One longtime meditator once said, I no longer beat myself up when my mind wanders or a negative thought arises. I just notice it, and eventually, it fades. So if there's ever a moment when desire rises inside you, don't panic. Don't judge. Just take a step back and acknowledge it's there. Take a slow, deep breath in, then breathe out, gently, and say to yourself, I'm feeling this, but I can still choose something else. Because mindfulness doesn't require you to be flawless. It just asks you to show up. And every time you do just for a moment, you're stepping out of the grip of ignorance. Temptation only feels big when you're not there. But when you are truly present, you are bigger than it. And as you move through this journey of self-awareness, you begin to realize something so simple and so profound. There's no greater enemy than unconsciousness, and no greater friend than mindfulness. Desire doesn't need to be crushed. It simply needs to be seen clearly. Because when you understand that desire is often just a reaction of a restless, empty mind, it no longer holds you captive. And even more beautifully awakening isn't just something you do for yourself. Just like that disciple who, after overcoming temptation, turned back to help the very man who once led him astray, you too can be a light for others. That's the heart of compassion. And that's the path of those who truly live the Buddha's teachings. So if what you've just heard touched your heart, if there's something inside you that longs to be seen, healed, and understood, then give yourself the gift of coming home to yourself each day through mindfulness. Because this isn't just how we rise above temptation. It's how we return to the deepest freedom of all. Buddhism Seeds is honored to walk beside you on this path of awakening. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need it, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your reflections. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video where we'll keep learning, contemplating, and growing together under the gentle light of the Dharma. Until then, may you stay grounded, awake, and peaceful, even in a world full of noise and change. See you in the next video.